We had arranged for a number of the teachers who were in the writing conference to try the materials out in their schools. That amounted to 105 schools. Each teacher was required to keep a log, and that log was sent to the BSCS weekly. So by the time we had a second writing conference, we had a tremendous amount of feedback.
The evaluation and testing program involved about 1,000 teachers and 165,000 students in 47 different states over a 3-year period, during which time the books were completely revised twice.
I put in the contracts, number one, the publishers could not modify any of the content. That was up to the BSCS.
I am happy to be able to say that these 3 versions, as well as a variety of supplementary BSCS materials, are finding very wide acceptance, both in American schools and in educational systems overseas.
Very quickly after the original publication of the programs, some countries, eventually 50 or so countries, actually adapted BSCS programs, and many of the personnel from BSCS were visiting those countries, helping them translate the program, not only from a language point of view, but helping countries integrate flora and fauna from their countries into the newly developed programs. The laboratory blocks, which were very, very popular in the early days of BSCS, were almost exclusively laboratories and hands-on field work by the students.
Laboratory work in biology was as new and innovative to many teachers as it was to the students.
We started to organize summer institutes to teach teachers how to use the BSCS materials with their students.
And we had to convince them that a lot of learning, important learning, can go on if you'll step back and let the students develop the graphs, present them to the class, and become involved in the solution to the inquiry.
The BSCS exists for the improvement of biological education and will continue to do so. It must remain at the cutting edge of content and methodology, reflecting advances both in biological sciences and in biological education.
When Bill Mayer took over as director, Bill had a slightly different vision and a slightly different challenge. Those 3 versions of BSCS programs were out and available. He had to continue them, which he did, but he also met the challenge of expanding our work, developing different grade levels and, in some cases, different disciplines.
He had run, as I did, those workshops for teachers. He had been in the writing teams in Boulder, chairing different writing teams. He was jovial. Now, there have been highs and lows over the past 50 years in the kind of biology and science this nation wants students to study. About 1974-75, there were hearings in Washington, D.C. Both Democrats and Republicans were calling the curriculum leadership in the nation to Washington, setting us in a hot spot and saying certain things about the materials and the people who developed the materials that were just not true. Well, one woman I remember called the BSCS textbooks the Playboy magazine books of the American school system. And she cried even describing the way we were teaching human reproduction. And so from that perspective, we were in hot water, but it didn't alter the BSCS program. We never stepped back from our objectives. We felt that human reproduction is part of biology, and we have an obligation to help people better understand, certainly 10th graders, 9th graders, human reproduction.
For a variety of social reasons, change in administration, change in funding priorities, when Jack Harder took over as director, he had a whole new set of challenges.
It was a very dark and dismal period for BSCS. Now, we proceeded to go out and raise private funds. We moved from Boulder, Louisville to Colorado Springs. We set up on campus at Colorado College, and we went right on with the revisions of our books using the royalties that we had developed, plus the income off of the sale of the building, and we continued to produce materials. We built a staff. We knew BSCS was going to continue to exist. We knew that our board was going to stick with us. We knew that we were going to raise money, and the esprit de corps was extremely high to fight back and continue to produce quality materials in science education. We were looking for publishers again, and it was about that time they came to us, Kendall Hunt, and said, we'd like to look at some of your materials, and it's worked. It's worked very well.
When Joe McInerney took over as director, Joe was in a situation where the funding priorities had shifted back.
There was this great concern again that science had fallen back into an approach to content and to an approach to pedagogy that did not reflect modern science, and that once again was going to compromise our ability to compete on an international level. A new round of funding actually became available. Roger had joined us at about that time as associate director. We brought out BSCS science tracks at the elementary level. We did a new middle school program, middle school science and technology. We made a very painful decision and let BSCS Yellow version go out of existence, and got funding from NSF to bring into existence a new program called BSCS Biology, a Human Approach. At the same time, we were working on a number of smaller modular programs that addressed particular areas of interest, areas that were moving very quickly. For example, the Human Genome Project. We developed an educational program called Mapping and Sequencing the Human Genome, Science, Ethics, and Public Policy.
All of those programs were part of our work when I returned in 1999 as director. BSCS Biology, a Human Approach is going to the 4th edition. Blue, the molecular approach, now 9th edition. BSCS Biology, green version, now in its 10th edition. We're into the 3rd edition of TRACS program and the 3rd edition of the middle school program. We were funded and eventually began developing BSCS Science and Inquiry approach.
The unique thing about the BSCS materials is the whole 5E model. And the 5E model really engages kids, and the kids, instead of me teaching the material and them sitting as passive learners, getting ready to parrot back whatever I have told them, instead they have to work with the material, and based on that work, they learn it. They don't learn it because I've told it to them. They learn it because they experience it.
Science is about questioning. Until you have a question and you're solving a problem, you're not doing science. And why that's different from the social sciences and the humanities, because that's all we have going in science is solving real problems in the natural world.
We established the ongoing work in professional development that started off with a grant from the National Science Foundation and is now one of the major areas of our work. The other thing that I wanted to do was to establish BSCS as an institution that is known for and does research and evaluation. What goes into the design and development of effective instructional materials? What goes into the implementation of those materials? What the teachers need to know and be able to do in order to not only just implement, but really implement in a way that enhances student learning.
Roger put in place 3 centers. Center for Curriculum Development, Center for Professional Development, Center for Research and Evaluation. The idea behind the centers is to demonstrate the relationship between the development of materials, the professional development needed to support those, and the research and evaluation that goes into understanding how effective those materials can be.
Because we thought these were all sex linked, but they couldn't be.
Teaching is very hard. There's no doubt about it, and it's day after day, and it's a lot of work. But there are moments when you see kids figure something out, and you see something go on in their head that hasn't happened before, and they'll even think out loud for you, and you can see it happen. And that magic that kids sometimes share with us, that's worth, staying up all night to get ready for it. Because it's real, and it happens, and it's exciting. And good material helps it happen. And BSCS stuff is good material.
2008 and beyond, the next 50 years of BSCS, the first century of BSCS, is committed to the learning of all students. We want all students to understand science. We're committed to the education of teachers, so teachers can do their job and focus on student learning. We're committed to evidence-based decisions about what we do in curriculum and what we do in professional development through rigorous research and evaluation.
Sometimes I don't make it to the bottom of the cup.
The questions that someone's asked, the degree of openness in those questions, the degree to which they're challenged to support their answers with evidence, that's what generates independent thinkers, that's what generates problem solvers, that's what generates the people we want leading the nation.
Students are capable of far more intellectual activity than we give them credit for.
Biologists, science educators, school administrators, teachers, and students oriented toward a goal of curriculum improvement.
And it's going to take support at the national level if we're going to continue to be a part of the future of science and science education and the training of engineers and medical doctors and scientists.
And it's probably more necessary now than ever. I sometimes despair that we are in an age of galloping anti-intellectualism. From the very highest levels of government, there is, I think, a thoroughgoing disrespect for a life of the mind, for a scientific integrity, for the principles that BSCS has stood for 50 years.
The real challenge for the society is to have a higher level of scientific literacy and technological literacy in society for all citizens.
And because science is the coolest thing to study.
I might use that.
I meant to mention that almost everyone involved was very enthusiastic, and they seemed to feel that, boy, they were doing something very important, and the attitude was just splendid.